Guys, for everyone that's jumping in right now, I don't know if you are or not, but I'm going to be reacting to the Ruby Franke. She's actually, her husband has just filed for divorce. She apparently has, she's an internet celebrity. She's apparently severely traumatized her children with just this insane beatings and starvation and manipulation. The woman's insane. And then her best friend, childhood psychologist, does the same stuff. It's insane. So we're going to go ahead and react to this right now. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And this is going to be like one of the biggest, court cases ever, because both these people need to be tossed away. And I mean, they're both sociopaths. You're gonna get that immediately, because I've seen a couple of the videos. Oh my gosh, straight up sociopaths. So let's go ahead and watch this. I'm coming in here with a very extreme bias towards any parent that abuses their child, any parent that chooses themselves over their children. I 100% biased against that. So let's watch.
Welcome to Connections. I'm Jody Hildebrandt.
And I'm Ruby Franke.
Kevin Franke files for divorce from his wife, accused child abuser Ruby Franke, and is also petitioning a state lawmaker to make sure Utah does a better job of weeding out untrained counselors. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Well, she is best known for her now defunct family YouTube channel called 8 Passengers. But accused child abuser Ruby Franke spent the last few years working with her business partner and co-defendant, Jody Hildebrandt, on a business organization called Connections. Franke and Hildebrandt, they offered advice on everything from relationships and parenting to intimacy and self-improvement, styling themselves as life coaches. They offered classes through their website and often posted their videos on YouTube and Instagram.
I love anger only when it's used in truth. Only in truth. And obviously you can have very clear, motivating anger inside truth. And unfortunately, most of us don't know how to do that. That when we feel anger, it predominantly goes into this place of distortion.
If you go into loving yourself, but you're not principled about it, you're going to slip. You're going to hurt yourself. That's where it goes into.
You hurt your kids, lady.
You have to have the principles with the soul in order for it to be self-love.
Well, now, today, Franke and Hildebrandt are each charged with 6 counts of aggravated child abuse with respect to 2 of Franke's youngest children. The kids were found in Hildebrandt's home in Ivins, Utah. The son actually escaped from the home, ran to a neighbor, telling him to call 911. The boy was emaciated. He had wounds like he had been tied up. The daughter was found in similar condition. They were both treated for malnourishment at a hospital. Really terrible, terrible story. And knowing that, it's easy to see that some of the women's advice in a whole new light.
One way to know if your child is managing what is on their plates is to ask, is my child showing up cheerful? Is my child showing up responsible? Is my child available if I ask her to do something like, hey, could you wash up the dishes for me? Hey, would you mind taking out the garbage? Are they available to say, yeah, sure, Or are they pushing back? I don't have time. I can't do that. That tells you they're not managing, because someone who's managing has time and space and motive for serving those around them.
Okay, I don't know if you guys heard that, but she doesn't want children. She doesn't want children. She wants servant robots. Let's go back. I just want to show you this.
Someone who's managing has time and space and motive for serving those around them.
Now, here is the thing. While Jody Hildebrandt did at one point seem to have a license as a, quote, mental health counselor in Utah, after her arrest, she ended up actually agreeing to give up her therapy license.
Good.
Franke's title of, quote, certified mental fitness trainer on the Connections website.
Certified mental fitness trainer. What is that? How do you get certification for a mental fitness trainer? You know who's got real good mental fitness? David Goggins. Do we need to go out there and run 100, 200-mile marathons every day? Or no, that's stupid. That is ridiculous. Certified mental wellness trainer. And by the way, this woman stands accused of terrible child tortures that she's done, her and her fitness buddy. Because they're right, the rest of the world is wrong. And yet their children were starved and beaten.
Was likely less accurate, and that is raising some concern in the state of Utah, and perhaps there is going to be a change. To talk more about this, I want to bring on our expert on Ruby Franke, and following all aspects of this case from the very beginning, we are joined once again by Brian Schnee, anchor reporter from KUTV2 News. Brian, so good to see you. Thanks so much for coming back on here.
Thanks for having me. Excited to always talk about developments as we see them come out in this case.
Now, Brian, I understand there's also been a big development with respect to Kevin Franke, right?
Today, November 29th, Kevin Franke filed in the state of Utah for divorce, as we understand it. And it was filed actually in the 4th District Court. And the petition for divorce is private, so we can't see a whole lot of it. But we do know that things were filed today here in the state of Utah.
So we don't know the reason for the divorce. I mean, we can assume, but we don't know the actual legal filing, the reason for it.
Domestic relations injunction.
All right, just a quick question to my crowd here. How many of you think that this is damage control? How many of you think that this man, I mean, because obviously the children were mentally abused, and we see a lot of that happening in the videos that I've seen. How much of the dad was a part of that? How much of this mental abuse did the dad allow under his watch? How much of this abuse did the dad encourage? Is this damage control? I'm just going to ask you guys right now. What do you guys think?
Outlining certain measures to govern the conduct of both parties involved. That is about all I see on it. There are different parts of the injunction that include some prohibitions against harassment, domestic violence, misuse of personal information. So Franke filing for divorce today with not a lot of information, as that petition itself is private, but we're just learning about this right now as of today here on the 29th.
And Brian, when you hear about that, I mean, we just talked about how the idea is how he's petitioning now for a change in the law so that, you know, people have the right qualifications to give this kind of advice, seemingly turning on his wife and Jody Hildebrand, or I should say maybe ex-wife, because he's now filing for divorce. This is consistent, I feel, from what we've heard from his lawyer, correct? And what with the position I think he's been taking, that he had no idea what was going on with Ruby Franke and the kids. I'm not surprised he filed for divorce.
Yeah, I don't think it's surprising. I just tried to trade some messages with Randy Kester earlier this week just to see if anything new was happening. And he told me, no, nothing's on the way here. And then, of course, this drops today. So this is interesting. And I think it shows that Kevin further wants to not only distance himself from Ruby, but also sort the situation out in juvenile court and figure out what to do with the kids.
Let's tackle it here. So this concerns my understanding. And first of all, I should tell you that it was your network that kind of broke this news, that Utah State Senator David Hinkins told your network, your outlet, that he has spoken with Ruby Franke's estranged husband, Kevin, about the qualifications, the certifications of Ruby Franke and Jody Hildebrand. Walk us through that.
First and foremost, some great reporting by my colleague Paul Nelson here at KUTV. He was working on Capitol Hill, looking at a number of different bills that are being worked on in sessions as they get preparing for a legislative session as we get to the new year. And he's been talking to people up there at the state capitol. And one of the things he had heard is that they're working on a bill, at least one state senator is, into looking at life coaches or people that kind of fit that mold And indeed, apparently this came from some concerns from Kevin Franke. And it's interesting to note the state senator here that's working on this bill, very beginning stages, I should say, no traction on it, no language in it as we understand, but an idea, right? Maybe starting to put pen to paper. He had not even really heard about this case as
Wow.
it seemed. So this came from, right. So that's what my reaction was to this. Kevin Franke reaches out to this state senator and says, hey, we need to look into this. And he even pointed to the part where, it ripped apart his marriage. You have to imagine that is involving Franke and Hildebrandt's relationship. So it's almost like this goes back to Jesse Hildebrandt a little bit more than it does Ruby Franke.
Okay, let's unpack that a little bit. So Jesse Hildebrandt, the niece of Jody Hildebrandt, had an opportunity to interview them, talked about the abuse that they suffered at the hands, allegedly, at Jody Hildebrandt. But walk us through, the idea here, before we even get into the state of Utah and what is required or not required of these kinds of instructors, the idea that Kevin would approach this state senator, are you surprised by that?
I am. I also don't know what the timeline looked like of when exactly this happened. I would imagine it's relatively recent, given the fact that lawmakers are starting to meet at the Capitol and go through the process of drafting bills and making change. And obviously, there's a large process after you even put the language out there. But it's interesting to know that this comes from inside the family to want to make a big change here in Utah about what is qualified and what needs to be put out there to coach people on their lives.
And let's talk about that. So in Utah, to be this kind of life coach, are there any qualifications?
No, the Division of Professional Licensing here in Utah, we refer to them as DOPL, and we've covered them before when talking about Hildebrandt's license being suspended many years ago. So DOPL is involved in the licensing for clinical, mental health and other therapists, which is what Jody had a license for way back when. But DOPL has never had any sort of restriction on a life coach being licensed in Utah. There's no standards for that industry here in the state. And you'd be hard pressed to find many states, as far as we understand it, here in the country where the life coaches have to have those standards put out there for their clients to understand. So the big thing we took away from this, Jesse, was if you're seeking a life coach, you better do your homework.
Thank you for the donuts. Yes, appreciate
And I guess the reason was, and I was reading about this, is they don't want to create too many requirements because there are people who could help their family members or their friends. And if you put too much of a stringent requirement in place, it might impact that. Does that make sense to you? Because that's what I saw.
It doesn't surprise me here in Utah that they wouldn't want to add more requirements. It's just kind of how things have been, at least in my experience since I've been here. However, the bills that are being drafted on Capitol Hill here, I feel like are more on current issues. Now, this is not as much of an issue, I think, as it is a very large play given this case, right? There's a lot of talk about life coaches now and what this mental fitness sort of coach looks like. So it doesn't surprise me that it's coming to light. It did surprise me that it's coming from Kevin Franke, apparently. That's where it's coming from. So it's interesting that the state senator is willing to look into it, first and foremost, which if you live here in the state and someone is your elected official, then you want to obviously have someone advocate for you on a larger scale. But it's using this high-profile case where two people are still incarcerated and in custody over child abuse allegations and charges. And that's where this bill comes from. And again, no language on paper yet, but it'll be interesting to see what that looks like. And it's my understanding that Senator Hinkins would like to work with the Division of Professional Licensing here in Utah to get this done. And DOPL said, we don't want to comment on this until that bill is drafted.
Well, few things there. So first of all, I'll say with Kevin Franke, doing this or allegedly contacting this state senator kind of shows how he feels about his wife and kind of feels how he feels about Jody Hildebrandt and what they were doing. Now, the Utah Division of Professional Licensing said, quote, life coaches are not required to be licensed in Utah. Therefore, there are no standards for the industry. There are a few national life coach consortiums that have some standards, but none that are enforceable in Utah yet.
This is absolutely ridiculous. Okay, so Ruby Franke, unlicensed, but she's she's this mental wellness coach or whatever, and her friend is a licensed whatever this thing is, and they were abusing children and explaining that through her license and whatever made up concept that Ruby Franke had over her. It's insane. And they just allowed this to happen. And look how big they grew. Like, they had a multi-million subscriber YouTube that they had. And it was all about torturing their children and making them servants and turning them into these little robots. That's ridiculous.
Do you see some...
And guess what? In Utah, there are no standards for the industry. None. You could just, hey, guess what? Since there's no standards, I'm a life coach. Boom! In Utah, because there's no standards. I'm not even required to be licensed in Utah. I'm a life coach, everybody.
complaints that are against life coaches who are former licensed behavioral health practitioners who lost a license and are now practicing as life coaches, but are providing the same services as when they were licensed, which is illegal. Now, so everybody knows, Brian, what are the complaints about connections? I mean, there were former clients who came out and said that what was going on was a problem, right?
By the way, this is super tart. I made this way too tart, so I'm going to just add some more water to it. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm just letting you guys know. How y'all doing today? We're watching this thing on Ruby Franke, and her husband is now getting a divorce from Ruby Franke because, you know, she's a psychopath! Allegedly. Allegedly a psychopath, allegedly. Allegedly a sociopath, allegedly abuses her children, allegedly, lots of legends. And we're learning about it right now. Let's watch.
What do we know about the former clients of Connections, the former clients of Franke and Hildebrand?
Well, a lot of this stems from the people that we've spoken to over the last few months that have their own personal story to share. And I want to make sure we clarify, all these stories are really about Jody Hildebrand. They're not about Ruby Franke. Franke's a different part of this piece. So this is talking about Connections Classroom and the types of tactics that were used. A lot of them, of course, focusing on making one individual in a relationship feeling guilty or feeling like they've had some sort of wrongdoing. A lot
Gaslighting. So they practice gaslighting. How interesting. Their whole idea is to make them feel guilty. I don't know if you've all been raised as a Christian, but guess what? If you did something wrong, you're going to hell. Guilt. Every time you do something wrong, guilt. So this is what they're using. They're using gaslighting. And by the way, I'm Christian. I realize what it is. Gaslighting, guilt.
A lot of this becomes sexual in nature, or has to do with separating the couple to find this common goal. And ultimately, what we've heard is Hildebrand's tactics ruined marriages compared to what you would want from a therapist or somebody trying to get you through those tough times, which would be bringing you together. It's almost as though she ripped couples apart.
So this mental wellness coach is out there destroying families. I'm sorry, I feel bad for those families. But she also destroyed her own family. And nobody saw the red flags until, hey, finally, the kids were abused and the kids were starved and this divorce is happening and the children are speaking up and they don't understand that their mom, it's not their fault, it's not the kids' fault, but yet again, we heard that they've been put under all this guilt. And the videos I've seen, it's guilt, gaslighting on the children. And now, after all this time, their mom, who in their minds must be doing something right, was the person that was wrong, and it was never those children's fault. And she's a internet celebrity. We made the wrong one famous here, folks. We made the wrong one famous. Let's keep listening.
As far as what we understand.
Okay, so we want to thank Morgan & Morgan for sponsoring this video. I think it's pretty clear from the stories that we cover that it's not always safe out there. When you're hurt, it can be pretty confusing. It can be scary.
Would you cheat on your wife? No.
Turn.
I love my wife.
And Morgan & Morgan is actually
Hey,
the
Vera!
largest injury law firm in America.
Vera!
You already have so much to think about. They make it super easy for you. They've completely modernized the process because you submit your claim, you sign contracts, you upload
I love my
documents, and
wife.
you talk to your whole legal team.
And I've never cheated on my wife.
That's it.
I don't need to.
Going to review your case in just 8 clicks.
Oh, there you go.
Also, they have 4,000.
They asked me, would I ever cheat on my wife? I said no.
Too, which is just amazing
I love
to
you.
think about. And in terms of price, you only pay them if you win. There's no upfront fee. So if you're injured, you want to join the over 3 million people that call them every year, you can submit a claim at
Can you swing up to-
www.forthepeople.com/lawandcrime or by dialing pound
I gotta do this
that's
thing.
pound 529
Just let me know.
on your phone.
Let me.
Trey Warner was an interesting person who I believe spoke to KUTV. He said that he was made to believe that, or was told that men, if they have impure thoughts, they're a danger to their families, right?
And that is the same thing that other people said to me. That reporting
course.
about Trey Warner from the same individual, my colleague here, Paul Nelson, who brought this story to us too. So great reporting by Paul all the way around to get this part of what happens next after this case on a larger scale, after talking to people like Trey. And Trey was very early on. I'm thinking week 1 or week 2 after we heard about the arrest. Trey was one of the early individuals to speak with us about what Jodi Hildebrandt was doing to her clients, ripping them apart, forcing the man to separate, and ultimately creating this natural divide, it seemed, instead of, again, bringing people together.
So just before we wrap this up, I want to talk one more time about the Ruby Franke aspect. You talked about how Jodi Hildebrandt, her former client's not too happy with her services. Well, going back to Senator Hankins, he said, quote, right now, there's nothing regulating. They can tell people to do anything they want, and there's no recourse.
What?
I think that those that are professing to be life coaches should have some type of a criteria that they need to some credibility. And then I believe he said in terms of Franke's title as a certified mental fitness trainer, it's just a title that somebody could make up and makes it sound professional when it's really probably not. Do you have any evidence or any kind of reporting about the problems in Ruby Franke's counseling? Obviously, with what she's accused of and what she professed through connections and her videos, we can come up and say something's not adding up. But have you heard any complaints directly about Ruby Franke?
No, most of it's on Jodi Hildebrandt. And again, on online comments or reviews or the people that have spoken to us about this, but none about Ruby's practice, so to say, about what she's listed as on the Connections Classroom website. So a lot of that is speculative, I think, right now, of trying to figure out, have people seen her for counseling? What did she really do with people? What sort of advice was she giving? How was she coaching these individuals? A lot of that still hasn't come to light yet.
Ryan Schnee, you can check him out on KUTV2 News. Excellent reporting as always, and also just a call out to your colleague as well for this great reporting on this kind of tangential topic. But, now with the divorce happening, I'm sure we're going to get a lot more updates as they come, and we'd love to have Brian you back on here on Sidebar to talk about it.
As always, it's a team effort here at 2 News, so we appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it. And that is all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Please subscribe.
All right. So it sounds like it's a mess. It sounds like there's a lot of abuse. Let's see if we can dive a little deeper here. Let's inside Ruby Franke's alleged double life. She had a double life? Let's check this out. 10 minutes.
On the address of your emergency.
I just had a 12-year-old boy show up here at my front door asking for help.
It was August 30th. A 12-year-old boy shows up at a stranger's house.
He's emaciated, he's got tape around his legs, he's hungry, and he's thirsty.
What?
What's your mom's name? Ruby Franke. Ruby Franke is his mom's name.
Ruby Franke.
Let's go back real quick. I want you all to see this. Tape around his legs. Hungry and thirsty. Do you also have it around his... Hold on. Okay. Tape around his leg. Tape! Tape! Around his legs. Hungry and thirsty. And this is from a life coach and a licensed therapist. What the...
Ruby Franke. Ironically, she'd been a high-flying Mormon momfluencer, attracting 2.5 million followers on her YouTube channel, 8 passengers. Ruby's personal brand built around tough love.
I was really hoping that keeping them home from school and wiping the floorboards would really bring pain.
But now, Ruby's 12-year-old son's pain brings this neighbor to tears.
This boy has been... This kid has obviously been... He's been...
tortured.
He's obviously covered in wounds.
The house the boy says he escaped from, Jody Hildebrandt's. Hours south of Ruby's house.
I'm Jody Hildebrandt.
And I'm Ruby.
Oh my God. As a dad, this breaks my heart. Because I constantly worry about my children. If you're a true parent, you constantly worry about your kids. You want your kids not to go through the same stuff that we went through. The abuse, because I was abused growing up, physically. Beatings, the spankings were nothing. But when my dad was super angry, it wouldn't stop. It would just keep going. Choking, hit with objects. Because it's one thing to get slapped across your face. It's another thing when the slaps don't stop. And these kids, I don't want this for anybody. And yet I see children beating up other children. I see parents locking their kids in cages. I see this every day. It is disgusting. It breaks my heart. And yet this woman was made into an internet celebrity. And that's all she did. So I feel that dad. That dad was crying. And it made me tear up because I couldn't imagine seeing a 12-year-old in my arms. Tape around his legs and wounds on him and hungry and thirsty and desperate for help, and he wasn't getting it for 12 years.
Ruby Franke.
Jody was a marriage counselor who also treated sex addiction through her work with the counseling network LifeStar. She joined forces with Ruby Franke on a life coaching business called Connections.
All of us want connection. We want to have relationships where we feel close and where there's love.
After that 911 call, Ruby's 12-year-old...
I'm going to make some speculations right now. She's a sociopath, so she wants complete control over everything. And what we just heard is that they used a lot of guilt and gaslighting to get exactly what they wanted. So that's what she's doing. She's going to use guilt and gaslighting. And apparently physical torture on somebody who's a 12-year-old child. Taping them up. And that's allowed in Utah. Because there's no standards. You don't need a license. We just learned that.
Son and her 10-year-old daughter were taken to the hospital.
The police find laptops, tablets, cell phones. They find ropes. They find duct tape. They find handcuffs.
Jody and Ruby were arrested and charged with 6 counts of felony child abuse. While the arrest sent shockwaves, some who knew Jody Hildebrandt have been raising concerns for years.
We knew that Jody does this. We knew 14, almost 15 years ago that she's already done this to me.
Jesse Hildebrandt, who uses they-them pronouns, has spent years finding a voice after suffering what they call brutal abuse at the hands of their Aunt Jody.
She would lock me in this room and write out my sins on a paper. She would come back in and read these sins back to me and have me kneel on the floor on my hands and knees and beg for forgiveness.
The 30-year-old has built a life far away from a strict Mormon upbringing.
I grew up in a very traditional Mormon household. Dad is the provider, and then my mom was a stay-at-home mom. My younger childhood was very happy.
But during adolescence, Jessie started to rebel. The conflicts came to a head. Jessie's parents decided it was best for Jessie to go live with Aunt Jody, and without warning, they left their teenager at a family gathering.
Woke up to a knock on the door, and it was Jody and my grandma and grandpa, and to tell me that my life as I knew it was about to change.
At first, Jessie says they decided to give the new arrangement a chance. After all, Jessie's aunt was a licensed counselor.
Jody Hildebrandt has been one of the top recommended therapists by the Mormon Church in Utah for at least 15 to 20 years.
Jeez.
But at home, Jessie says their aunt was an altogether different person.
She made me sleep outside in the snow. She
What?
duct taped me. I wasn't allowed to speak to anyone.
What, in theory, was the justification for the duct tape?
The duct tape was, in her words, an external reminder to me that I'm a liar and that every word that comes out of my mouth is a lie.
Whoa! Okay, so she duct taped the licensed therapist where there's no standards. Hell, you don't even need the license in Utah. She would duct tape her own niece. And remember, that 12-year-old was covered in tape too. It was an external reminder of her own lies. What is that kind of thinking? That is a cult. That is an insane cult. It's torture. It's human torture. It's perverse. It's evil. And these people are recommended by a church? All right, let's keep going. I can't even process it. It makes me so angry because these people, that both these women need that same torture done back onto them for the rest of their life, and then when they die, into eternity.
In March of 2010, Jessie made it to the police station in American Fork and filed a report against Aunt Jody. Jessie's statements in that report echoing the story they told us: duct tape over her mouth, sleeping outside, not allowing her to talk. Police sent Jessie to a teen safe home, but after one day, Jessie ended up back with Aunt Jody.
So after I went to the police, the punishments got more and more severe.
After nearly a year of living with Aunt Jody, their aunt brought Jessie.
I don't know if you guys have seen the videos, and we could look at the videos if you want to. I don't know if you guys have seen the videos where they go and they ask these people that have left, especially the stricter Mormon sects right there in Utah, because they've all run to the police. Some of them were getting assaulted, impregnated by their own parents or uncles. And some of those parents and uncles were priests, or like higher up in the church. And so they'll run away and pregnant, go to the police. My parent has been doing this to me forever. Can you please protect me from them? And what did the police do? Well, the police only care about who they're getting paid from, and they're getting paid from their parents that are impregnating them, knowing that that's a massive sin. But guess what? They run the church. So they will run and they'll put them right back in that same situation, and they know, I don't know who. Hey, she ran off and got pregnant by somebody else. It wasn't me. And they'll abuse them even more because they know that those police are on their side. And then they're stuck mentally in that abusive situation.
To work.
And I have to,
and physically in that situation.
And I grabbed that jacket and I literally just started running.
Yeah.
Jessie never went back.
Good.
With dark accusations against Jody coming to light,
Principles, if you will.
scrutiny is also falling on her partner on Connections, Ruby Franke.
They are distorted.
People who watched 8 Passengers were the ones to first kind of ring the alarm as to this alleged abuse that we're seeing now.
People have been pointing out how problematic this family is for a while.
When does the way a parent parents go from cringeworthy to child abuse.
My bedroom was taken away for 7 months, and then you give it back like a couple weeks ago.
I don't think our viewers know that.
You've been sleeping on a beanbag.
I've been sleeping on a beanbag since October.
After the controversy, viewers were questioning.
His room was taken away for 7 months. Sleeping on a beanbag. I mean, the manipulation's insane. They want so much complete control over these human beings, their own children, their own blood relatives, that they will say and do anything to make them feel trapped. Like they need Ruby Franke or Hildebrand. Like they need them. When in fact, they would have been way safer if they would have ran away like she did. And what I'm looking forward to in the trial is their own kids coming up to the stand. I want to see what they say. I want to hear every one of the evidences from them about the terrible tortures they went through underneath the guise of Mormonism, underneath the guise of life coaching and mental health therapists.
Ruby's parenting style and her husband Kevin's, who often joined her on the 8-passenger channel. The two have now been separated for more than a year.
Many of the viewers of 8 Passengers over the past 2 or 3 years became more and more disturbed and started turning Ruby and Kevin into Child Protective Services in Utah.
Good.
In 2020, a Change.org petition requesting that CPS check on the children received hundreds of signatures. Impact has obtained records showing police responded to the Franke home more than a dozen times over the past few years, including several reports of juvenile problems in 2018 and 2019, and multiple welfare checks in 2022.
And to the point where they felt like it was a necessity to go talk to the family, at least to the children, to find out if there was any merit to any of the allegations.
But police who investigated the case were unable to speak to the children and filed a request for a warrant to enter the home.
Even though it was submitted to the judge, the warrant was not signed and it wasn't granted. And so there wasn't much they could do at that point.
CPS.
So the judge was in on it. I mean, he didn't sign off on it. He was in on it. So we should be suing that judge too, and the police department that was involved in this. Well, probably not the police department, because if the police department did take it, it gave it to the judge didn't sign off on it, he's in on it. He's allowed it to happen.
Yes, is now being investigated for their handling of the case by Utah's Child Welfare Legislative Oversight Panel.
Get him!
Through his attorney, Ruby's...
Let me tell you something, guys. Just because you belong to a religion, I belong to Christianity, does not mean you're allowed to abuse your children. Does not mean you're allowed to abuse other human beings. It doesn't matter what your religion is. These are human beings. This is their own children. And they were trying to use the religion and psychology to abuse these children.
Husband Kevin says those early complaints were nothing serious.
Kevin felt like that they were just being harassed by people online, calling the authorities and having to come to their home. It was just a difference in parenting style, but nothing abusive up to that point.
After the shocking arrest, there's a growing chorus of people laying the blame squarely on Jody Hildebrand.
It's 100% Jody.
Facts.
And I understand why the public is focusing on Ruby. It's Ruby's children. But all of these theories and these modalities and these parenting ideas, that all comes from Jody.
Kevin feels like Jody manipulated the entire family, children included.
Yeah.
Since her arrest, Jody Hildebrand has given up her counseling license. Sitting in a striped prison jumpsuit, Jody answered to a higher authority, a judge.
Jody Nan Hildebrand?
Yes.
Okay.
Ruby Franke sat expressionless, a far cry from the bubbly momfluencer of 8 Passengers fame.
Yeah.
Miss Franke, can you hear me?
Yes.
Both.
Look at them. No makeup on. They want you to feel bad for them. They were doing the same stuff with the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial, because remember that they did. I mean, they went in depth on that, but they don't want any makeup on. Okay, minimal. They want them to look as sad and pathetic as possible, so that people will feel bad for them for torturing their own kids. All right, come on.
Ordered held without bail, and neither have entered a plea. Impact reached out to both Ruby and Jody's attorneys. Ruby's declined to comment. We have yet to hear back from Jody's.
Just one count of aggravated child abuse is up to 15 years in jail. At the same time, they can say, you know what, we found out you abused them 6 different times. You could really get to a high number here.
Ruby's 4 minor kids are in the state's custody, but their father, Kevin, seen here in these DailyMail.com photos, is trying to win them back.
His hopes and his objective is to convince the state that he's a good dad and that those children would be much better off with him than in state's custody.
For Jesse, healing and moving on has been a long and winding journey.
I was incredibly unstable in my early 20s. I thought that I was evil. I thought that I was this unlovable creature from hell.
Jesse is not currently speaking with their parents. Jesse says the wounds from the alleged abuse at the hands of Aunt Jody still too raw. Impact reached out to Jesse's father for comment and did not receive a response. Jesse is now living life on their own terms and recently moved to Seattle to be a tattoo artist.
Awesome.
I've been a musician pretty much my whole life.
This
is just a song about just relationships, like all good songs.
Up the last scheduled train to the city. Watch the glow from the street lights go by.
What would you say to Jody if she were sitting across from you right now?
You did not win. And you do not own my life.
That's powerful.
You have no power.
Good job, girl. Good job. Aww. She's crying.
Our thanks to Juju. You can see the full episode of Ruby Franke, a momfluencer's double life, on Impact by Nightline, now streaming.
All right, that's kind of like the end of the deep dive that we're going to take into Ruby Franke right now. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous that this human being was allowed to impact and torture other human beings, especially since they were her own children. Absolutely disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. But I hope you all have a great day. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you. I'm going to go ahead and end it right there. And sad. Absolutely sad stuff. All right. Y'all have a great day. Thank you. Peace.